Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news taking place on the African scene. And our main topic today will be the Indian-African Summit, and we will be discussing its significance to both India and the African continent. But now let's have a look at this report. The UN's top official in West Africa said that a long-awaited regional task force is set to begin raids on Boko Haram's last enclaves when the rainy season ends soon. Early this year, Nigerian and Chadian forces, the militant group which was sworn allegiance to Daesh, to cede largest swaths of territory in northern Nigeria. More details in the following report.
Appealing to the public for information about their whereabouts, Nigeria's army has released a poster of its 100 most wanted Boko Haram suspects. They're published in English and the local language of Hausa and Kanuri, and with 3 hotline numbers, was launched on Wednesday in the north city of Maiduguri. Boko Haram's shadowy leader Abu Bakr al-Shiku features twice in the rows of colored photographs, but there was no immediate explanation about the duplication. However, Nigeria's military has long claimed that Shiku, notorious for his rambling monologues and threats against civilian leaders, is a nom de guerre for a number of lookalikers. The authorities have claimed that has been killed on at least 3 occasions, only for him to appear in a video soon afterwards to taunt defense chiefs. He was last seen on camera in February threatening to disrupt Nigeria's presidential elections, but has since only been heard on audio messages, including pledging allegiance to the so-called Daesh group. The most wanted poster in the latest military drive against the militants tries to meet a December deadline to bring the 6-year insurgency to a close. According to human rights groups, human intelligence has long been seen as key to stopping the group's activities, but has been hindered by military abuses against civilians, including arbitrary detention. Despite heavy security, sleeper cells are said to be active in Maiduguri, given the number of times it has been attacked by suicide and bomb attacks in recent weeks.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're glad to be joined today by Ambassador Mohamed Abdel Ghaffar, President of the African Economic Council. Thank you, sir, for joining us today on Africa Today.
Thank you very much for having me with you today.
Just allow me, we'll go to this report and we'll be right back to talk about our main topic, which is the Indian-African Summit. Though it was unclear when he would take over mediating stalled peace talks, the United Nations Security Council approved the appointment of German UN official Martin Kobler as the new UN Special Envoy to Libya. Libya has fallen into turmoil with its intentionally recognized government on one side and self-styled administration holding Tripoli on the other hand. The details follow.
Rival Libyan political leaders could face European asset freeze and travel sanctions if they were deemed to be deliberately blocking attempts to broker a settlement between the country's warring factions. After a month of negotiations, the UN envoy has presented Libya's rival factions with a proposed national unity government, but hardliners on both sides have resisted the power-sharing deal and talks have stalled. The United Nations has warned about possible sanctions before, and the European Union had previously considered travel bans and asset freezes against 5 Libyan military commanders, threatening violence against a future government. Lawmakers in both the elected House of Representatives Parliament in eastern Libya and the rival General National Congress in Tripoli in the west of the sprawling North African OPEC state have delayed any official vote on the deal. Western powers say a UN-backed agreement for a unity government is the only way to end the conflict between the rival factions and their armed allies competing for power 4 years after rebels overthrew Muammar Gaddafi. They have been prodding both sides to accept the peace plan and promised more aid, where the militants and people smugglers have gained grounds in Libya's chaos just across the Mediterranean from mainland Europe.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and back to our main topic. As we mentioned earlier, the Indian African Summit held in New Delhi last week and attended by President Abdel al-Sisi. And we will start by talking about the Indian African historical roots. Would you please elaborate on this?
The Indian-African historical relationship, it goes deep in the history since the ancient Egyptian era and the Sanskrit civilization, like 5,000 years before his birth, and it goes up to the modern history, even during the struggle against the British colonialism. There's some similarity in the struggle. Chief Mahatma Gandhi, he started his life as a lawyer in Johannesburg, South Africa. And after that, Nelson Mandela, as an African leader, he started his study in Bombay. He studied also the law, and he got the values of and the liberation from the culture there in India. And even Mahatma Gandhi, after he got his first case in Johannesburg, he also got his values of freedom and switched to a fighter against the British colonialism after what he has seen in Johannesburg. And after that, you can see a big cooperation between the African countries and India and some economical communities like African Caribbean Pacific community since 2005. And we started the first summit for the African-Indian cooperation 2008, and we have some files of cooperation between Egypt and India in this topic, a way of struggle against colonialism. Yeah. Like the Minister of Science and Research, Nadia Zakhari, 2012, she used to be the chief of the Ministers of Science, the African Ministers of Science and Research, to work on technology transfer between India. We know that India have good advance in some industry like the milestone. They are one of the biggest producer for the iron ore, the raw material for the steel, and they are also advanced in some services like the IT. And we can find a lot of investors and businessmen, Indian investors and businessmen, they are in the eastern coast of Africa.
Right, sir. Besides, of course, the importance of the long history of Indian-Egyptian relations, which President al-Sisi focused on in his speech, the long history that we had in common, the British colonialism, we would also like to focus on some very important issues mentioned by President al-Sisi during his speech at the Indian African Summit. He mentioned, of course, the issue of terrorism, fighting terrorism in the region. Would you please shed some light on this issue?
Yeah, you know, India playing a big role according to the geographical situation of India. They are just next to Afghanistan, and a lot of extreme groups came from there, and their security also have done already very good filing for most of the tourism group in that area. For the information exchange, it's going to help very much to get like a confrontation against the tourism. And you know, also in the technology, if we are talking about security and the defense and the
we would also like
fighting.
to shed some light on the issue of technology transfer, which was also mentioned in the president's speech during the summit.
Yeah, but there's some very important advance for India. There is a cooperation program for arming and developing the missiles between Russia and India. So we have seen Kaliber missiles, which Russia used it to fight Daesh in Syria. They launched these missiles from the coast of Russia. It goes more than 1,500 kilometers up to Syria. These missiles, these Kaliber missiles, it is a fruit of technology cooperation between Russia and India, and that missiles can go up to 2,500 kilometers.
Right, sir. Also among the major issues mentioned by the president was the issue of climate change. How do you see the importance of this issue, and how was it addressed during the summit, especially that we have the upcoming COP21 conference that will be held in Paris soon?
Yeah. President Sisi is the chief of the leaders and head of the states committee of climate change, and he suggested to get benefit of the Indian in some technology working in or helping in reduce the emissions like carbon emissions. They have some technologies environment friendly for desalination, the water desalination. They have technology for non-furrion air conditioning. They also advanced in the agriculture. They have very good technology for agriculture. So His Excellency President Sisi working hard to get the benefit for the African countries through his position in that committee as a head of that committee, to transfer that technology to the African countries. And the relationship between Africa and India, it goes since the non-ally movement during Nasser and Gandhi, Tito time, and also the cooperation between South and South countries, which gathering Africa, Asia, Latin America.
Right, sir. What, in your opinion, are the most important recommendations of the Indian-African summit, especially that this is one of the biggest summits in the history of India?
Okay. The most important recommendation, especially in the economical sector, India is a very good market for a lot of African products. Not only the raw material, which Africa producing a lot of it, but also for some simple industry, we can get it in the African countries, but also there's a lot of investment even in Egypt in some services like hoteling, like IT investment, some of the medical sector. The same thing in the African, especially Eastern African coast. A lot of Indian are investing there, and there is a big community living there since early 50s. Even during Idi Amin, he departed a lot of them when he used to be the president of Uganda. He departed a lot of them to Kenya, but at the time being, you can find Indian living there, and they enjoy the African nationality, like Kenyan nationality. They are original from India. Mauritius nationalities. They are originally from India, Uganda, and so on.
Right. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke of a very important issue, which is the Security Council should reflect today's geopolitical realities. How do you see this issue?
Yeah. You know, all of the third world countries or the developed countries looking for to get a chair in the Security Council.
And India has called for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council.
Yes, yes, because only 5 seats does not representing all the world countries that what he mentioned for. It is not, they are not considering the geopolitical situation for some countries. So there's a leader country in the south like India, there's leader country in the north like Egypt, and I would like to put it like this, you know, during 1956, Egypt was supposed to be a member of the Security Council, and they didn't like to get as a member of the Security Council because they have a fair and doctrine. They said we have some fight or troubles between other countries, so we would like to be fair in this as a member in the Security Council.
Right, sir. Also, Prime Minister Modi called on African leaders to join an alliance of solar-rich countries at next month's Paris conference for climate change. How do you comment on this issue?
Yeah, the advanced countries, they are participating with more than 70% of the emission, and the world nano. Actually, because of all the industrial activities of the advanced countries, and they are trying to keep their production of pollution or their share of polluting emission to our climate, and they would like to exchange that with the carbon value. So for this, what Prime Minister Modi said, that the rich country is supposed to do their duty towards this.
Right. India also promised $10 billion in new credit and $600 million in grant aid to the African countries. How do you see this initiative from India?
That initiative is a leading because African countries, they have a lot of investment opportunities with high value on the investment. Like the highest rate of interest between other countries because it is still virgin continent. Also, we have through India, there is a good chance to make our African countries can join BRICS economical community, which gathering the leader industrial countries like Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa as a monitoring country. That community offering $100 billion for investment. You know, it is like a parallel chance with the World Fund and the World Bank. So they are directing this fund to be invested in the third world countries, and they put in mind the African countries, which has a lot of investment opportunities there.
Right. Prime Minister Modi also stressed the importance of strengthening trade ties and especially in oil and gas fields and strengthening maritime cooperation. Would you please tell us more about the economics of the Indian African Summit?
Okay. Actually, India, it is not one of the oil countries. So they are depending on importing oil and gas from abroad. And now we have a lot of African countries, they have oil and gas, and India, you can say they are thirsty for that kind of energy. Plus, India is advanced in solar energy as well, like number 5 on the world after the advanced country number 1 now is China, and India number 5 on the world. For this kind of exchange, trading exchange, he put a lot of advantages for their market to the African production. Plus also the investment. We said India, they have a good experience in some services, and they have investment in different African countries, especially hoteling services. They have a lot of hotels in African countries, and in Egypt they have some services like the medical services as well.
Right. Sir, the Indian African Summit has been described as the biggest diplomatic engagement of Africa by the Modi government. How do you evaluate the success of the Indian African Summit?
Okay. I believe it achieved a lot of fruits of that summit, and it got a lot of benefits because that sort of cooperation, it is really changing like a frozen climate between the South-South cooperation since the 50s and 60s era. So I really expecting there are going to be near benefits for that cooperation. We can see it soon.
Of course, the Indian-African cooperation and the Indian-Egyptian cooperation is a very important file, and we'll be following up on this issue. Ambassador Mohamed Abdel Ghaffar, President of the African Economic Council. Many thanks, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, with this we wrap up this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.